to Life Quantum Action. This podcast is for people who already know the work and are learning how to live it. We talk about identity, business, money, leadership, and what it actually takes to stay with who you're becoming when life applies pressure. I'm Carly, and I am so glad that you're here. All right, I'm going to set the scene. We're in Byron Bay. It's late at night. Everyone else is fast asleep. And I'm sitting outside on a camping chair, you know, one of those blue fold-out chairs that everyone takes camping and to picnics. And it's really quiet. I can hear the sound of the waves in the background, the occasional footsteps of somebody walking past, the night creatures rustling away in the trees, and the occasional mosquito that I have to slap away from my arm. I've got a joint in one hand and I've got a book in the other. And that book is The Power of the Subconscious Mind by Dr. Joseph Murphy. And I'm reading that book by Caravan Park Streetlight. And somewhere in those pages on one of those nights, amongst the underlined paragraphs, I had a moment. It wasn't a really dramatic moment. It wasn't a breakdown, but it was just one of those quiet, kind of uncomfortable, oh shit moments. And this episode today is about what that moment was, what led to that moment, and what happened as a result of that. This is a waking up story, if you will, and you probably have your own version of this. A moment where you got what you wanted. You got what you wanted, but you discovered that it didn't fix things in the way that you thought or the way that you hoped it would. To understand this moment, you're going to need a little context. I had done something that most people only ever talk about. And so many people have told me that they would love to do this thing. And this was back in 2022. My then husband and I, we sold our house and we sold most of our things, most of our possessions. Like, we sold a lot of stuff. And we bought a caravan and a new vehicle to tow the caravan, and we set off to travel Australia. All right, so me, husband, our little girl who was 4 at the time, and our big floofy doggo, Rupert. And I had very consciously manifested that. It's something that I had always wanted to do. And it's funny, it was something that I had always wanted to do, but once I became a mum, I thought, well, it's just not going to happen now. Like, it's too hard, right? And how many times have you thought that, you know, especially if you're a parent, it's like, oh, that just feels too hard. But I set the intention and I saw it. And over time, you know, wheels were put in motion, and probably very quickly from having made the decision to sell up and do the thing, and then to between making the decision and between leaving, there was probably only about 3 months. So the house sold and our caravan came through in the most incredible circumstances. And at that point, right, so this is only, you know, I don't know, we're still kind of in the peak of all the things that were happening in the early 2020s. There was an absolute boom in the caravan industry. And so, you know, I sort of knew the kind of caravan that I wanted. I knew I wanted it to be brand new. Knew it had to have a bathroom and, you know, all the things. And we were told, look, there's pretty much a 6-month wait, right, for a caravan. I was like, well, that's not going to do. And we actually got given one by that company, virtually the exact caravan that I wanted, that was meant for an ambassador of that company. And the timing of that worked in ways that it had absolutely no business working because every place we went to, we were told like, nope, there's a way. You just have to kind of be patient. And I'm like, well, hang on a second. I got a lot on the line here. And this is what I want to do. So I'm going to do it. And of course it happened. So I was calling in this big dream. And if you've been in my world for a little while, like you may remember, like it was all over my content at the time. I was talking about this big dream that I had manifested. And yeah, I truly felt so fucking lucky and so fucking grateful that I had this opportunity to do what so many people would love to do. Like this was it. This was the life. Like this, I was going to be living and creating this quiet, slow, free kind of lifestyle that I had wanted. And I did. I truly felt so lucky. And then we got on the road. And when I say it, I'm going to say it rained, but that just does not do what actually happened justice. Like it was torrential rain. Like I had never seen, having lived in Adelaide all my life, I had never seen rain like that in my life. And it rained hard for weeks, right? This is just the beginning, but there were so many periods of like really heavy rain to the point where I think there was one. Well, it only came up on my my story memories the other day, actually. So it must have been March in Byron, and they typically do get really big downpours then. But I walked outside of the caravan and I was up to my ankles in water and all that. Like we had tried to like get everything inside as quickly as we could. But when it comes down, it comes down and it comes down fast. So we just did the best that we could. But anyway, so early weeks. Soon as we get out to the coast, like we made the decision, we're going to drive from Adelaide, we're going to get out to the coast as quickly as we can because we were chasing the sun, right? It's Adelaide winter and we were not available for that. We are chasing the sun. And so we get out to the coast and we'd found a spot where we were going to stay for a little while, and we had to stay there for a bit because we had to get the caravan serviced. And so we're like, yep, we'll stay here for a few weeks. It's beautiful. It's by the river. It's by the ocean. It's the south coast of New South Wales, right? And it was absolutely beautiful. And it was raining, and I'm talking like it was like 100 mils a day. It was absolutely incredible. So we had just sold our house, packed up our lives, said goodbye to our families, our friends, our support network in the pursuit of this big dream to chase the sun. And we find ourselves on the East Coast inundated with rain, living in this tiny space with nowhere to go. And so we're trying to learn this new way of living with each other, not having the usual comforts of home, discovering that we've got leaks in our brand new caravan and all of these things. We were moving, not in the early days, but, we were got to the point where having to move every couple of days and all of these things that just come with such an incredibly huge change in lifestyle. And we had already left in a very fragile state in terms of our marriage. And so we were fighting more than ever. We were fighting more than we ever had at home. The dog was stressed as fuck because he, he's living in this tiny little space with us and, getting told to move out of the way all the time. And my daughter, she was so confused. And with all of these things happening, I just remember having this kind of creeping realization. It was slow and it didn't come all at once. And that's probably because I had tried to push it away and avoid it. But over time, I realized, okay, wow, I've manifested this big dream, and also I have manifested the exact same patterns that I had always had. But instead of being in a home in the suburbs, these patterns were now just dressed up in a boho dress with bare feet instead of the suburban life. And so when things aren't working, most of us do the same thing first. We look outside of us. We look at the mirror, we blame the mirror, we go up to the mirror and we, want to shake it, and we're like, why are you still showing me this? Why are you still showing me this? Why are you still being this way? Why won't you change? And the mirror for me in that moment was the other person in the relationship. And for a period of time, I blamed him for a lot of what was happening. And I was directing so much of my energy outward and toward him, because that felt a lot easier than what was waiting for me if I actually dared to turn the mirror around. And, spoiler alert, I did turn the mirror around, just not in that moment. So I blamed him a lot in the beginning, and I also blamed the caravan, and I maintain that. I still blame the caravan because it was a very, very small space. But anyway, slowly, I started to notice something. I started to notice that the patterns that I was frustrated by were not new. They were not new. I'd felt them before in very different circumstances with a different backdrop in a very different season of life, or in various different seasons of life. And I started to understand something that I had not wanted to look at. And that was that I was the common denominator, right? And hear me when I say that this is not in any way, self-blaming or, everything's my fault or anything like that. But this was me actually looking at the mirror and really, for the first time in my life, actually truly seeing what stared back at me, and knowing that that reflection had to come from me. It didn't come from anybody else. And this was really uncomfortable. But it was ultimately one of the most freeing moments, one of the most freeing realizations in my entire life. I realized that I am the operant power, and I was creating that experience just like I am continuing to create my experiences now. But this person in my life, back then, because I'm referring to this moment in time, he could only show up in my reality the way that I expected him to. And so instead of, grabbing the mirror and shaking it and demanding that it change, I realized that I had to be the one to change. I had been on absolute autopilot for 7 months at this point. So manifesting that big dream, the outcome, without paying any attention to who I was actually being. So without paying any attention to my self-concept, to the stories that were running underneath everything. So I hadn't actually fundamentally changed. I'd manifested some really fucking cool things, but internally I was still the same. And this happens to so many people who are doing the work. I literally speak to people nearly every day who are like, I've manifested this thing or this person in my life or whatever it is, and then I've got it all, but then I've lost it or it hasn't worked out. Like, why is that? And I had thought that manifesting the sale of the house and manifesting the caravan was me doing the work. So I completely took my foot off the pedal for quite a few months. And, it was like I was just so exhausted and so drained internally, mentally, in all the ways. But I hadn't yet understood that the real work was not about the outcome. it was not about what I was getting, but it was about who I was becoming, who I was being. So back to those late nights outside with the book, where me and Joseph would sit and have a little smoke together in the dark. That was where it all started to shift. And I was also doing, at this point, I was doing a course, around the law of assumption and just really trying to understand more about that, because as I've spoken about before in the last episode, when I was first exposed to manifestation, it was all very much a law of attraction kind of vibe. It was all very much The Secret, and you must remain high vibe to get what you want, positive vibes only, all of that bullshit that is very exhausting. And so I really wanted to understand the law of assumption and how my beliefs about myself, other people, and about the world actually influence my 3D reality. So I was doing that course, and I was reading The Power of the Subconscious Mind alongside. And I will link that book below in the notes, because, oh my God, that book legitimately changed my life. I have read some really good books before. I love Joe Dispenza. I've even loved some of the Abraham Hicks books and everything. But this book is really special, because it just completely changed. It changed me. It changed my life. And anyway, so something about the combination of the book and the course in that particular season of my life, and with all of these things that were on my heart, and with actually starting to, finding myself having a certain amount now, of space and a certain amount of time in the evening where it was quiet, it started to land differently. And it was it wasn't landing as just information this time. It was landing as real recognition. Real recognition. And the other profound moment, I guess, that I really consciously remembering when something landed in this way was only last year, and I did a mushroom trip, and that really just deepened the identity work even more for me. But that's another moment in time that I can recall when it just landed in my body, I was finally ready to see what I needed to see. But anyway, I'll share that story another time. So in this moment, Joseph Murphy, the course that I was doing, I could actually see for the first time ever the stories that I'd been carrying. All of the stories about not being good enough, all of the fears about being abandoned, all of the things about feeling that I didn't deserve, good things, and I just didn't deserve respect. I didn't deserve, the things that I wanted. It was all of the good things in life were reserved for people who weren't me. And so I could see very, very clearly how those stories had really been shaping everything in my life up to that point. All of the different relationships that I had been in, the relationship I was in at the time, all the decisions that I made, and what I allowed into my life, who I allowed into my life, and what I pushed away, what I was pushing away subconsciously. And so I got to the point where I realized, I was like, ooh, I haven't manifested bad things. I've just manifested exactly who I believe myself to be. And so I sat with that for a while. I sat with that for nights and nights and nights. And I did not process this with anybody. I mean, firstly, there was probably no one to really process it with in the way that I needed to process it at that point. And I really genuinely believed that it had to land just with me first. So I sat with it. Night after night, I'm sitting outside the caravan till God knows what time. I just sat and I read and I thought and I sat and I just let it all settle. And eventually I got to the point where I was like, you know what? No, I am going to make the decision to end this marriage because it is no longer right for me. It is no longer right for him or our family. And when I got to that point, I was no longer in this, I no longer was feeling angry. I was no longer blaming him either. And so in a very quiet, kind of clear knowing that I was ready to start consciously choosing who I was becoming. And I knew that I couldn't do that while staying in that same pattern. So I had to break that pattern. And after I made the choice to break that pattern, I felt so much relief. Like I felt it physically in my body. And it wasn't happiness necessarily, that came later, but it was relief, right? And there is a difference between happiness and relief. And I think I felt that relief because I knew that I was at the beginning of something real. I knew that I was at the beginning of something to truly change myself and how I was experiencing my life. And, you know, it wasn't like a new strategy or a new life circumstance or anything, right? I had tried the whole new life circumstance by uprooting myself and everyone. But this was a new self-concept, truly a new identity and a new version of me. And so I started to pay attention in a way that I hadn't before. And I really started to understand, like, oh, okay, this is how I'm thinking. This is what I'm saying to myself. Oh, that's what I believe about that. And I started to become really aware of that instead of just allowing my subconscious to run the show on autopilot. So I started to notice the thoughts and pay attention to them, my inner dialogue, all of those beliefs that were running underneath the conversations, underneath decisions, underneath how I was showing up in every area of my life. And when something came up that didn't belong to who I was choosing to be and the new identity that I was installing, I got to the point where I was able to interrupt it. And with practice, you know, that is now just how I think. When something is not in alignment with who I want to be and the reality that I desire to create, I interrupt it. And I don't do it with force, but it's a quiet, hold up, that's not mine anymore. This is what I'm choosing instead. This is what I am choosing instead because this is who I'm choosing to be. And I choose again. And it's like, it's rep by rep, it's night by night, day by day. And slowly, that new self-concept, that new identity, that new version of me stopped feeling like something that I was reaching for. It stopped feeling like it was far away and outside of me. And it started feeling like something or someone who I already was. At the beginning, when I first started this work, there was a lot of hope. There was a lot of hope that this was real, hope that it was going to work, hope that I would finally actually now stop repeating the same patterns that I had always repeated. And the only evidence that I had was looking back at the patterns that I had created, the things that I had manifested that I, maybe that I didn't want, and realizing that, you know what, this actually works. The law actually works. I had just been using it very unconsciously. And that was enough to keep me going, because I realized that if I had created that, then what can I create when I actually fucking pay attention and put some intention into it? And so over time, very slowly again, that hope shifted, and it's far less about hope now. It's about inevitability. It's about inevitability. And that is what identity stabilization actually feels like when it's working. It's not excitement. It's not being constantly motivated and activated. But it's this like quiet, unshakable knowing that you are who you have decided to be. And that as long as you continue to be who you've decided to be, your reality will always catch up. It always catches up because it has to. And to anyone who says, oh, but I've manifested these things that I don't want, I'll always invite them to just have a look at who you've been being in the lead up to that. Who have you been being? How have you been identifying? And if you do that from a really, truly honest place and you get like radically fucking real with yourself, you will get to a point where you go, oh yeah, okay, I can see how this is how my life has unfolded because that's who I've been being. And so when you do this is not about blaming yourself. It's about taking your power back and remembering that you are the operant power. So if this episode today has brought anything up for you, I don't want you to feel like you need to rush it, to fix it, to analyze. Just notice it. Where have you been focused on manifesting a particular outcome without actually paying attention to who you're being in the process? And is there a quiet, oh shit, moment that you've been sitting with as well that maybe hasn't had space to fully land just yet? And if there is, then give it that space. Give yourself that space. Okay, if this resonated, I have created an audio for you called Stay, which is an identity stabilization audio, and it was made exactly for this in-between phase, okay? The space between who you have been and who you know that you are becoming. If you want to get your hands on that, the link is in the show notes. And otherwise, I will see you in the next episode.